Hey guys, Wayne Philmore, and I am here with my colleagues. I'm here with Jake Lebrun, and I'm here with Bryzik Alameth. And today we are going to be debating. This is going to be my second live debate on my page, and we are going to be debating, or the debate topic is going to be creation science versus scientism. Now, if you hear that loud breathing right now, I have no idea what it is. I think in maybe it's Bryce's phone. I think like if you guys have like your phone close to your face, or maybe if you got like a microphone, down by your mouth, maybe that's kind of like the frequency we're hearing right now. But anyway, this is how the debate will go. The debate will go for first. There will be a first half of it, where the first half of it will be 5 minutes. Then the second half of it, or our body arguments, will be 15 to 20 minutes. Let's go 20 minutes. And the last part of the debate will be for our rebuttals, and that will be 10 minutes. So you got 5, 20, 10. Our moderator is Bryzik. Say hi, Bryzik.
Uh,
Yeah, he sounds a little bit like a robot. Not that good of a connection, but it's all cool. And Jake, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone. This is Jake Lebrun.
All right, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Jake.
Well, I have always had a strong interest in science ever since I was a child, and have always believed in an ancient universe. By ancient, about 15 billion years old, and I've always believed in biological evolution, something I learned as a child. Religiously, I am very familiar with Christianity, especially the fundamentalist biblical literalist sect, along with young Earth creationists. Even when I was a Christian, as I was for several years as a young man and teenager, I did not believe in young Earth creationism. I believed that evolution was the hand of God, and God being eternal, why hurry? It could take billions or hundreds of millions of years to bring His creation about. I am, however, an apostate. I am a practicing humanist, and I have a naturalistic belief system. I don't believe in the supernatural, be it gods, demons, heaven, hell, or spiritual mechanisms like karma or fate. And as such, I am here to defend a materialist, mainstream scientific, old universe view of reality and its origins.
Alrighty, and I think everybody who's on the page knows who I am, but let me just reintroduce myself. My name is Wayne Philmore. I am what you would call a Christian apologist. I am a younger creationist, and I go around teaching and preaching on the Bible and how the Bible teaches that the world or the universe altogether is no older than 6,000 years old. I believe that Genesis 1:1 all the way down to Revelations is scientifically accurate to the T. And I believe that it is the God of the Bible, Yahweh, Jehovah Jireh, who made the world in 6 literal 24-hour days. And I'm going to be defending that position today in our debate creation science versus scientism. Now, we're going to choose who gets to go first from a coin toss. Now, even though you can't see Bryce's screen, we're just going to pray that he tells you the truth. But Bryce, do you have a quarter? All right. I will pick tails. Jake, I guess that leaves you with heads.
I'm
And
fine with
just
it.
just toss that up and just tell us the results, and then we'll see who goes first.
Looks like I'm up.
Alrighty. Let's start his time, Brezik. We each get 5 minutes for our opening statement. Then we have 20 minutes for our body, and we have 10 minutes in closing.
Okay, time started. All right. The topic of the debate is scientism rather versus creation science. Now, we'll be talking a lot about science, and we're also going to be talking a bit about worldviews. Now, one thing I do want to make a distinction about is the difference between science and scientism. Now, both are children and siblings of the philosophy of rationalism. Rationalism is a philosophical attitude that meaningful knowledge can come from observable fact and logical operations based on those observations. Okay? Now, once you begin with the idea that you can obtain useful, accurate knowledge from the use of logic and reason and objective observation, that leads to a few different things. Now, one thing that comes out of that is science. Now, if you start with the idea that truth can be known via reason and logical operations on on facts, uh, science, you get science. Now, science is the process of learning facts using reason about the physical universe. A lot of people will have complaints about science, saying that science is not moral, science can't reveal meaning in life, it can't reveal your purpose, it doesn't have anything to do with ethics. And they're absolutely correct, but at the same time, they're also absolutely irrelevant. Science isn't supposed to reveal moral truth. Science is only supposed to reveal truth about the physical universe. Now, if the other sibling of rationalism is rational ethics, now something like humanism, which is the logical operation of reason to discover moral truth, would be something from that. Now, a subset of rationalism is scientism. Scientism would be the belief that we can know can obtain useful, accurate knowledge about the physical universe from the use of science. So someone who puts their stock and faith in science as being an accurate way to reveal knowledge about the physical universe is someone who's using scientism. Okay, but that's not a moral philosophy. That is a means by which to discover truth about the physical universe. Now, if we're going to talk about versus creation science, now we're talking about how the universe came about, how things like life came about, and of course, in a more self-interested bent of our species, is how our species came about, how each of us came from the beginning of the universe, or even how the universe began. I think it's essential first to defend the concept of deep time when we talk about that, because if someone is going to go with a mainstream view of an ancient universe, by ancient I mean somewhere along the lines of 15 billion years old, and someone's going to posit biological evolution driven by random genetic change and mutation coupled with natural selection for the most well adapted of those randomly changed species for their particular environment, then such gradual changes are going to have to be acted upon over the course of hundreds of millions or billions of years in order for us to arrive at the universe as we know it now. Just a few examples of that is we can observe the formation of geological strata. We can observe and measure tectonic plate motion. We can observe that the continents that are thousands of miles apart appear to be parts of a jigsaw that could produce a single supercontinent in the world. These things are observable, these things are measurable, but in order for them to reach their current state, we obviously see that these things would have had to take tens or hundreds of millions of years or even billions of years, as is the case with random genetic change and selection of the most appropriate organisms. We've seen evolution in labs. E. coli have been seen and measured and quantified the ability to digest things like citrate compounds over the course, having evolved that over the course in lab conditions over 20,000 generations. We have seen evolution, but it's a far cry from a single bacterium learning to use a new food source when compared to human beings evolving from ape-like ancestors over the course of millions of years. So necessarily, we have to defend deep time before we can defend the Big Bang Theory or evolution. You guys still there? Everybody hear me?
Yep, I'm still here.
I believe we're right at 5 minutes. I don't want to cheat.
All right, gotcha. All right, that was actually that was a really good presentation because you actually All right, in your last part, and this is exactly what my presentation is all about. So just give me a minute to pull my presentation up, and then we can begin. All right, I'm pulling up my presentation right now. Let me share my screen with you guys so you guys can actually see it. That would make sense, right? All right, can you guys see my screen? All righty.
Here we go. Looks good.
Tell me if it freezes up or anything. All right, can you guys see it? What do you say?
It says it's loading here.
All right. Tell me when you can see it.
It looks like creationism, creation science versus scientism. I see what I assume is the first slide.
Yep, you got it right. Ryza, can you see it? All right, gotcha. All right, and now we can begin. All right, you can start my time. All right. So, whenever you start a debate or whenever you start anything, you basically need some liable points to make so that you can just prove that you are making this stuff up. A lot of people always say, what's the biggest proof of the Bible? What's the biggest proof of the Bible? Well, one of the biggest proofs that we have for the Bible is prophecy, and a prophecy is nothing but a fulfilled prediction. But when you have a certain amount of fulfilled predictions over and over and over again, it lets the person know who is experiencing or who has seen these predictions come true over and over and over again. We know through mathematics that only a certain amount of predictions are going to happen. And if I predict something about 20 times, if I make 20 predictions right now and all 20 of those predictions come to pass, that is actually something that is out of the ordinary. It actually is kind of supernatural. So here are my predictions for this debate. I predict that time, space, and matter had a beginning, and they all came into existence simultaneously in that exact order. They all came into existence in the exact order of time, space, and matter. I predict the creation was once perfect, Genesis 1:31. I predict the supernatural came before the natural, Genesis 1:1. I predict our natural senses are limited inside of this natural dimension, Deuteronomy 29:29. I predict there are observational evidence that prove the supernatural in this natural world, Deuteronomy 29:29. I predict science cannot work without the God of the Bible, Colossians 1:16. So here are these predictions, and it's up to the viewers to see if these predictions actually are liable for this module. And also, I predict that without the God of the Bible, reality can't be made sense of. So, there is something in different religions outside of Christianity and outside of all of these other religions. There's something called the art of demythologizing. So there's something called mythology, which is basically myths that include anything with supernatural or heroic elements, like Thor, or let's say Hercules, or the story of the Minotaur. These are myths. And so what a lot of people try to do is they try to mythologize these myths, not even knowing that the art of demythologizing is actually a religion in and out of itself. And so what we see from the art of demythologizing is basically really the art of scientism. Scientism is the belief that there are only things in this universe that we can test and observe and repeat using the scientific method. In essence, it says that unless you can test and observe things, then those things do not exist. So out of scientism, that out of the religion of scientism comes the denomination of atheism, which is basically from the root of scientism. Atheism is just one of the branches of scientism. Then you have naturalism. Then you have humanism. And out of all these different religions, or out of all of these different denominations of that one religion, you have uniformitarianism. And uniformitarianism says that how everything is happening today is how it's always been. First Peter says that there are people who are willfully ignorant, or they will be willfully ignorant in the future about the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. The Bible says that there were people who will say in the last days, are the things that are happening now, they always have been going on like this forever, since the beginning of time. And so we actually see a prediction, or we see a prophecy coming to pass. We have people who believe in uniformitarianism, and exactly how the Bible says that there will be people who will say that the way things are happening now are the way things have always been happening. And what do you know? That's what we have today, where we have uniformitarianism, which is basically one of the many branches from the root of scientism, which is the art of demythologizing, which in and out of itself is a religion. So, entropy. What do you say? That's time? Hello?
I'm still here.
Isaac, you still there? What that time? Oh, that's fine. I can't really. Jake, can you hear him?
I can barely hear him. However, I heard something break through. By my time, you still had 1 minute. So if you want to go one more minute, that's fine with me.
All right. Just start my time, I guess, and we can do this. Um, so everything in the universe had a beginning. Everything in the universe is running down. The question is, what wound it up? So when time, space, and matter came into existence, it all had to come into existence at one time. If you had space and matter but no time, when would you put it? If you had matter and time but no space, where would you put it? And I think that's my time.
Okay, well done.
Alrighty, let me take myself down. Alrighty. Whenever you're ready, Jake.
Okay, I'll be starting in just 1 second here. Okay, I'm not sure if our moderator can hear us. However, I am starting now, so if you can hear us, go ahead and start time. All right, very well done, Wayne, to my esteemed colleague. Now, he did make a few points that I thought were salient and I should comment on. One, he describes atheism. Now, I don't know if he called atheism a religion. It's really not a religion. Atheism is simply nothing more than the absence of a belief in the gods. It might be weak atheism. I don't think there are gods. I assume there are no gods. Or it might be a very strong, strident atheism. I know for a fact that there are no gods. Either way, it's simply an absence of the belief in gods, which is not very appropriate to label a religion because it's a belief of negation. It's the absence of a belief. When people ask me what my beliefs are, I don't tell them that I'm an atheist. I tell them that I'm a humanist. By telling them that I'm a humanist, it tells them what I do believe, not what I don't believe. So he regards atheism and humanism. He addresses both of them. He also believes naturalism. I don't believe naturalism can be referred to as a religion either. Naturalism is the philosophical belief in the natural world. It is the disbelief in supernaturalism. Now, I am an atheist, and I have a naturalistic philosophy, and I am a humanist. All three of these apply to me, but I don't regard them as being religious. They're not necessarily philosophical beliefs. They're different types of belief. I regard my religion as humanism, my philosophy to be naturalistic, and my regard to the gods is simply atheistic. I don't believe in the gods. He also mentions uniformitarianism. What's interesting is that he seems to say that there's folly in uniformitarianism, and yet, as someone who believes strongly in mainstream science, I don't think that is correct. Now, uniformitarianism, for those theoretical physicists who posit what happened immediately after the Big Bang, they don't hold to uniformitarianism. Now, they may hold to uniformitarianism over almost the entire 15 billion years of the cosmos's existence, but in that time immediately after the Big Bang, they believe that fundamental forces of the universe did not exist in distinct manners as they do now. For example, the weak atomic force and the strong atomic force to the Big Bang, the same force. Electromagnetism at one time was joined with those forces. At one time, even an infinitesimal amount of time after the Big Bang, even gravitation was one force with these other forces. However, he is mostly correct in that physicists do believe that once these forces were divided and became distinct and started operating on both energy and matter, a very short period of time after the Big Bang, then all the natural laws of the universe operated in a consistent manner and continued to do so up until this very day. The same elemental forces, magnetism, the electromagnetism, whether it's a form of electricity, movement of electrons, charges, or electromagnetic radiation like light or gamma rays, gravitation, the strong atomic force, the weak atomic force, all of these operate on all energy and matter, and they do so in a consistent, observable way. Now, uniformitarianism, as far as things happening the same as they always have according to human behavior, is also untrue. For example, the philosopher Steven Pinker wrote a book called Angels of Our Better Nature. People in general may exhibit the same human nature, but that changes over time. Actually, the per capita murder rate has been dropping measurably and predictably for thousands of years. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I'm sure you could look those up. There was a staggeringly high death rate due to intentional violence between humans in prehistoric times. And they can measure this because a person who gets mauled by a cave bear leaves bones that are distinctly marked differently from someone who's killed with a stone axe. Now, as far as the creation of life, the start of life, and the biological evolution of life, there's a lot of ground to cover here. I'll try to do it justice, but life is defined as matter that exhibits certain properties. Important among these are metabolism, homeostasis, which is the ability of an organism to regulate its internal environment, organization. Life forms are obviously very highly structured and organized, growth, adaptation, and life must exhibit reproduction, else a species becomes extinct. Life, according to the naturalistic worldview, is not something that was created by the gods in whom we do not believe, but rather life seems to be an emergent property given the way that the natural laws operate on matter and energy in the material universe. Darwinian evolution doesn't address the origin of life, and of course that's an object of intense study and great interest among the scientific community, whether it be panspermia, which is the idea that the crucial elements of life or life forms themselves came from somewhere else besides the Earth, which of course only kicks the can down the road, because then you have to ask, well, where did those life forms or materials come from? Or whether the idea that it was in a organic soup of molecules in shallow clay pools billions of years ago, which was very popular in mainstream. There's a theory that's gaining traction that life was spawned in glaciers. because of the freezing of ice crystals, would highly concentrate the pockets of liquid water and catalyze the reaction of organic compounds therein, even against the anti-catalytic effects of the extreme cold. However, it came about, once life forms did exist, they exhibited behavior posited by Charles Darwin in his seminal work, Origin of Species. Evolution functions as the interplay of two main forces, which are random mutation and natural selection. Where a lot of people get it wrong is they believe that evolution is a guided process, and mainstream evolutionary biologists say specifically the opposite, and they say it's their mantra. It's not a guided process. Random mutation is just that. It's random. Whether you have a creature that has plumage or a fur coat, whether it becomes heavier, whether it becomes lighter, whether scales evolve into feathers, whether it becomes denser, all of these things are completely random. It's not intended for these creatures to evolve in a particular direction. They just evolve in all directions at once. The other wheel to the cart is natural selection. If a creature lives in a dark environment and its coat becomes darker and more closely matches that environment, it didn't intend for that to happen. It happened randomly, but the result of that happening is that it is better camouflaged, it survives longer, and it passes on that genetic information and that advantage that that information gives to its offspring. Evolution is not a matter of simple species devolving into complex species. There is no more highly evolved or lesser evolved organisms. These organisms simply evolve in a random manner, but the ones that are most successful in terms of passing on their genes and their traits tied to those genes to their offspring are the ones that evolve there. And also another example is that the same trait may be both an advantage or a disadvantage in different environments. For example, if you look at human skin color, if you go back just a couple thousand years to where people lived, Europeans had very light skin and sub-Saharan Africans had very dark skin. Well, which one is better? Well, it depends on whether you're home or not. The very dark skin that would give sub-Saharan Africans in the savannah the protection against sun sickness, severe sunburn, and skin cancer would be a terrible disadvantage in the shady forests of northern Europe, where they would be subjected to the crippling effects of rickets from a severe vitamin D deficiency. So it's not a matter of what's good or bad, what's highly evolved, what's less highly evolved. It's simply a matter of what works for the environment that the organism is in. Also, evolution is has been observed directly in a lab. For example, E. coli developing the ability to digest citrates over approximately 20,000 generations. We also observe evolution indirectly through the fossil record. Now, this, of course, assumes deep time. We have to assume deep time because we can observe and measure the formation of geological strata. But if those observations are carried out to account for thousands of feet of sediment, then the organisms that we find in the layers that we judge to be the oldest must have been there tens or hundreds of millions of years ago. There are many transitional forms that have been found. Just one example would be the line which evolved horses. Eohippus as a size of a dog. This animal had 4 toes on each foot. In a certain strata, they believe this is 60 million years ago. And then they find Mesohippus and Myohippus, which was about 40 million and 30 million years ago, respectively. These were very similar organisms, but they had 3 toes on all of their feet. In other strata, they found Pliohippus, which they dated to be approximately 10 million years ago, and they found these on the North American continent as well. And they found modern horses, fossils of modern horses or near modern horses, approximately 4, and strata that they dated to 4 million years ago. The dating of the strata is extremely important because they have the Eohippus. The Eohippus did not coincide in any strata with the Mesohippus. They did not coincide with the Pliohippus, and they did not coincide with modern horses. These were all just different types of animal that all lived in the same time, and as recently as 6,000 years ago, then we would expect to find them mixed up. Why are these very, very specific uh, areas in the geological strata so discrete? And you'll have to forgive me, fossils are not my thing. I'm not an expert on fossils. I do have a close friend that would be much better at explaining all that. I'm much stronger with biology than I am with paleontology. There's also a lot of confusion with speciation in the microevolution versus macroevolution debate. Speciation is when people say, well, if we evolved from apes, then why are there still apes? Well, if the gods made us out of dirt, why is there still dirt? Now, it sounds like a cheeky comeback or a joke, but it's not. And the answer is very much the same. According to the Genesis account, God made man out of the dust of the earth, but it never said that he used all of the dust of the earth. That would be silly. Plus, we wouldn't even know what dust was if there was no longer dust around. Well, speciation works in the same manner. If you have a species that evolves, has a population within a species that evolves to the extent that it can no longer interbreed with the original stock and produce fertile offspring, that by definition is speciation. However, none of that requires that the original stock be destroyed. For example, if you have, say, a population that's separated a bit by a river running through a particular area or whatever. For example, this took place in the Congo, where regular chimps and pygmy chimpanzees live. Now, I don't know whether they're completely different species, whether they're infertile, but there are distinct and observable behavioral and anatomical differences between those two populations. And since chimpanzees cannot swim, they're separated by this river. It's assumed that the river separated an original population, and that because of the genetic drift, they formed two different species or two subspecies. In that particular case, there's no way of knowing which one is closer to the original common ancestor, but a species branching off by no means from an original stock by no means requires that original stock, that original species, be removed. And of course, there's I'm not sure if I can wrap this up in the time allotted. Lastly, supernaturalism. I don't believe that the idea of supernaturalism even exists. The supernatural is simply the natural that we don't understand yet. Prehistoric man might have understood rocks, he might have understood napping flint, but he certainly didn't understand fire. Now, of course, we understand fire. We don't consider it supernatural. We know that it's a rapid oxidation of compounds, and that produces a plasma that glows that's observable as flame. Fire is not supernatural to us. Supernaturalism is, even if we make the concession that we believe that angels or karma or gods exist, even they wouldn't be supernatural. Even if they existed, they would not be supernatural. They would simply be part of the universe, just as the things we deem natural. It would just be something that we didn't understand the exact nature of. I'm at 15 minutes 30 seconds, guys. Y'all still with me? Okay, well, I've got a few points. Would you like me to go on, or?
Go for it. Go for it. It's your time. It's your
Okay.
time.
You know what? I can wrap it up in just a couple minutes, guys. One thing that comes up constantly is the watchmaker analogy. If you find a watch laying in a field, you of course assume that there is a watchmaker. Why? Because we know how the universe works. We look around us and we know that complex mechanisms like watches don't spring into existence randomly. They require an intelligence, they require intent, they require design in order to be built and in order to function. However, the watchmaker analogy has a problem because there are profound differences in the behavior of matter and energy on a macroscopic, cellular, atomic, planetary, or galactic scales. The very same forces at work on a watch are also at work on a DNA molecule or on a planet or on a moon or on a galaxy. But because of the radical differences in the scale of those systems, there are radically different effects, different proportions of those various effects on each other. For example, a gecko climbs the wall because the finely feathered surfaces on its toes allow it to have a molecular attraction to the material on the wall, whether it's glass, stone, brickwork. A person couldn't do that. You might have suction cups. If it's a ferrous metal, you might be able to use powerful electromagnets. But there's no way I would have enough static in my body to stick to a wall without my electrocuting myself. If you have a 50-foot tall mine shaft, if you drop a bug, even a flightless bug, down that mine shaft, it probably wouldn't even notice. A mouse could probably fall that distance without being seriously injured. A man falling down it would be badly injured and probably killed. An elephant would make a horrible mess. There's no hope of it surviving. For that matter, a whale, even gently placed on the beach, would suffocate under its own weight. And even while this is the case, the water strider, a small insect, walks around, runs, and skates on the surface of a pond without even falling through and breaking the surface tension. The same physical forces are operating consistently on all these things. However, those forces, surface tension, electromagnetic attraction, gravity, friction, they're all operating the same, but because of scale, they're operating in different proportions. And that makes all the difference. You say, well, the watchmaker has to have a watch, therefore a living organism has to have a designer. It's not the same thing. Exactly right. That's why it's not the same thing. There are radical differences between the way things on a macroscopic scale like a watch, there's radical differences between how things behave on that macroscopic scale and how they behave on the molecular scale. Okay. Well, I didn't have a cheeky way to end that. I hope that's sufficient. I did go over, and I do appreciate your graciousness in allowing me to go over.
Oh, it's still your time. You got about 2 more minutes.
I thought it was. I thought we were doing 15-minute main.
20. I said 15 to 20, so it doesn't matter.
15 to 20. Well,
yeah.
we're coming up right on 20, and that's what I had for my main. I covered all my points.
All right, got you. Give me 1 minute. All right, everybody can see? All right. And you can start my time. Let me just restart my timer real quick. And I'm resetting my timer. Bryson, just tell me when you start yours. 20. All right. So I was talking about entropy. So, everything in the universe had a beginning. How do we know that? We know that because everything in the universe is running down. The question is, what wound it up? And so the real problem between creation science and scientism, or atheism, or humanism, or naturalism, we both know that time exists. Time is here. But the way we interpret how time got here, we're both arguing about what wound it up. So, when time, space, and matter came into existence, it all had to come into existence at one time. If you had space and matter but no time, when would you put it? If you had matter and time but no space, where would you put it? So just for that sheer reason, if you had space and matter but no time, you wouldn't have a time frame to put it in. So all of this had to come into existence all at the same time. It's called the Trinity of Trinities. You can't have one without the other. We actually live in a Trinity of Trinities where we have solid, liquid, and gas, and you cannot live in a dimension without one or the other. We live in a dimension where we have length, width, and depth, We need all of these. We need these trinities of trinities so that life can be habitable, so that life can happen in the first place. So genetics. We have mutations. We have pigs with 2 heads. We have people with 6 and 7 fingers. So mutations prove that one time there was perfection before there was imperfection. There once was good before there was evil. We know this because the shadows prove the sunshine. Literally. In order to have shadows, you need sunshine. You can't have sunshine without shadows, but you can't have shadows without sunshines. You can have good without evil, but evil can't exist without good. Therefore, our DNA was once perfect because now it's imperfect. The imperfections prove the perfection. Exactly what we see in Genesis 1:31, where God said his work was finished, and it wasn't just good, it was very good. These imperfections and these mutations and these bad things happening within our DNA strands and inside of our genomes, they prove that our genomes, they prove that our genetics are perfect. Natural selection versus evolution. A lot of times we get natural selection confused with evolution, but all we see is natural selection. There are 6 kinds of evolution, but we only see microevolution. There's cosmic evolution, cosmology, and that's the one where we talk about deep time and space. There's stellar evolution. There's chemical evolution. There's chemical evolution, there's organic evolution, there's macroevolution, and there's microevolution. And so the only one that we actually observed is microevolution, and microevolution is nothing but natural selection. Animals produce after their kind, but just like we see in the second law of thermodynamics, where we see entropy, we also see these different kinds of animal, whenever they reproduce, they keep on losing information. They lose genetic information. What produces a coyote, and then the coyote produces the dingo, and then the dingo produces the collie, and the collie produces the poodle. It's not evolving, they're devolving. These are not, this isn't evolution. These are genetic defects or genetic mutations. So the question is why? Why are they losing information? I believe they're losing information because of the fall in Genesis 3, but according to evolutionists, this has always been going on, which means that if losing information and having mutations in their DNA is wrong, that means that death has always been here. There's nothing wrong with people dying. So that means that death is the hero of the plot in evolution. There's nothing wrong with death. When people die, evolutionists should clap. So a lot of times, evolutionists will have you believe that we're looking at evolution, but no, we're just looking at natural selection. So Darwin was right about natural selection. As a matter of fact, creationists have no problem with natural selection because we actually discovered it first. Edward Blythe, you can do your research and look him up. He actually made a research paper that was called Variety of Animals. So what we're seeing, we're not seeing speciation. A lot of people use that word, but that word, as a matter of fact, I wouldn't even call that word actually real science. We see variations within the kind. Would you say a wolf and a coyote are not the same kind of animal? They are the same kind of animal. Because a different variation of that same kind. So we see natural selection. We don't see evolution. We don't see these animals getting better and their mutations are getting fixed by themselves. And these wolves are producing hybrid wolves that are bigger and stronger. No. We see wolves producing coyotes, coyotes producing dingoes, collies producing poodles. And we know that at one time poodles didn't exist. Because if you have the bad, you need the good. You can have the good without the bad, but in order to have bad, you can't have good. So, God, when I say that a poodle is good, so no, we do not see evolution. We've never seen evolution. We've only seen natural selection. And the people who go about saying that we have seen evolution, they don't understand the difference between natural selection and evolution. So you have to say microevolution certainly is true. We certainly do see evolution. It's just microevolution. Natural selection versus evolution again, part 2. Here's a quick example. Say you have 2 original dogs, right? And let's see those 2 original dogs, a girl dog and a boy dog, a pink dog and a blue dog. They go into a region where it's very hot. Well, then all the dogs with thin fur genes, they would, basically flourish, right? And all the dogs with long fur, they would die out, and all you would be left with is the dogs with short fur in that hot climate. So those dogs will reproduce. They only would have that information in their DNA to produce dogs with short hair in that location. So certain mutations will be dominant in that certain hot location. And that location, we will only see dogs with short fur because that gene has been selected for the area because that's where they will survive it. But that's not a gain of information. That's a new combination of information that was already there. They didn't gain anything. Nothing was made new. The information was already in the genes. So if those same two dogs, the blue dog and the pink dog, go to a region where it's cold, well then the dogs with the long fur will flourish, and the dogs with the short fur would die off. And once again, that's not evolution. That's natural selection. That's all we have ever seen. We have never seen animals producing new genetic code in their DNA. We only see them lose genetic code. But those mutations or those the information they have in their genes in those locations, those are the dominant mutations in that location because that's the only mutation that can survive in that area. Just like we have different skin tones, uh, those skin tones are dominant in certain locations because that's the skin tone that can likely survive in that location. So, can the supernatural be proven? Time, space, and matter, and I know I put time and space is actually space time, but I say time and space because that's the exact order how it happened in Genesis. Time and space and matter is all that there is in this natural world. So, if the universe is not eternal, what was before this universe? The Bible says that God made the universe. Universe is Greek for one spoken verse. God spoke the world into existence by the power of His word. Hebrews actually says that. I actually interpret it like this: God made the universe by the power of His energy, because words are energy. So the Bible actually got that right again 2,000 years ago. That's another prediction. That's another prophecy that we actually see fulfilled today. A lot of people back then, they didn't know anything about physics, but now today we can look at what Hebrew says, how God made the world by the power of His word or by the power of His energy, and we know that energy is eternal. And so actually the Bible got that right 2,000 years ago. The first cause of the universe had to be timeless, it had to be spaceless, it had to be immaterial, and it had to abide by greater laws than the laws of this dimension. It cannot be bound by space and time if it created space and time. If whatever made this universe was already inside of space and time, it didn't really create anything, did it? And let me see. At one time, this natural world didn't exist. Yeah, at one time, this natural world didn't exist. So that means that whatever had to create this universe, it had to be supernatural. It had to be outside of time and space, like I've been saying. Now, we all know the Big Bang had a beginning, but anything that has a beginning is eternal, and that means that if it has a beginning, then that means that it couldn't have created time, because it's not timeless, it's not spaceless, it's not immaterial. The Big Bang was inside of time already. So, can cosmology, cosmic evolution, or scientism account for the color spectrum? What do I mean? Well, in Genesis 1:3, it says God said, "Let there be light." And then later on, God made the light source. God made the source for the light. So first God made the light, then He made the source for the light. But we don't understand it because in English we don't have two different words for a light. I can say something like "turn on the light," or I can say "there is the light." So in Hebrew, when God made the light in Genesis 1:3, first He made the light, then He made the source for the light. The source for the light now today is the sun, or it's the energy that comes from the sun, or the energy that comes from the electromagnetic spectrum. But before God made that, God was the light source. And the Bible tells us in Revelation that when all of this ends, God will be the source of the light again. And the Bible says that there will be no need for the sun because God will be the source of all light. So the electromagnetic spectrum, it has different radio waves and microwaves and gamma rays and X-rays. And the problem with scientism, once again, is it says that things in this universe do not exist unless it's testable, unless it's observational and testable or repeatable. Now, here's the funny thing. Before the electromagnetic spectrum, before radio waves or microwaves or gamma rays were observational through the tools that we have, did they exist according to scientism? Because according to scientism, these things didn't exist until we discovered them. So the radio waves, microwaves, uh, ultraviolet rays, ultraviolet light, did those things exist before we were able to actually discover them? They don't know. And even the Big Bang can't account for color. Where did color come from? Where did the light come from? They can't tell you. They don't know. It's funny how a book written 2,000 years ago is so detailed and so intricate. It actually tells you in the very first chapter how the light came to be, and we just didn't understand it. Genesis 1:3, when God said, "Let there be light," God made the light, and then later on, God made the source for the light. So right there in the book of Genesis, that tells us exactly where color came from. Does the Big Bang hold up to the law of causality, or does the Big Bang hold up to this? Well, let's see. All right, so now we've all seen a demonstration of the Big Bang. Well, not really, that was just a CGI animation. But now we've all seen exactly what the Big Bang was, and we all have some type of imagination of what actually happened billions of years ago. All right, so does the Big Bang hold up to that law? First of all, here's some questions that we should ask. What blew up? How did it get there? How did the matter and the energy and the stuff get there? If it was matter and energy that blew up in the first place, because we don't even know what blew up. And if the Big Bang existed inside of space and time already, how could it have caused space and time? That's a big contradiction within the cosmology hypothesis, because it's not even a theory. You can't test it, you can't observe it, you can't repeat it. In the cosmology hypothesis, it says that the Big Bang made everything in the universe. So if the Big Bang made everything in the universe, how could it have existed inside of the universe already? That doesn't make any sense. The Big Bang is in spaceless, timeless, or immaterial. Science of gaps. A lot of times you always hear a lot of people who are atheists or who are in the religion of Scientism, because atheism is just a branch of the tree of Scientism. Scientism is the root. They always say, oh, well, people who believe in God, they believe in God of the gaps, right? The God of the gaps, where they say, well, because we don't know, God did it. No, that's not true. The reason why we believe in God is because the things that we do know, for the things that we can observe, for the things that we can test, the things that we can repeat. You know, the Bible is the only religious book in the world that actually says, hey, test me out, try me out. And so we see a lot of science of the gaps coming from Scientism, which is a religious belief that they cannot prove. You cannot prove that all of what we have in the universe are only things that can be observational, tested, and repeated. You can't see love, but yet we know love exists. So here are some of the science of the gaps. Because we don't know, therefore, billions of years, right? Well, we don't know what made the Big Bang. We don't know where it came from. We don't know what blew up. But, it just happened billions of years ago. Even with the transitional animals that we're supposed to see from evolution, right? If I tell you that today, if somebody goes out and kisses a frog, well, in a day or two, it'll turn into a prince. Well, we know for a fact that's a fairy tale. That's a myth. But if somebody says, well, oh, if you go out and you kiss a frog, the frog will turn into a prince in billions of years. We believe that. Why? Because the magic formula for evolution is billions of years. Whenever you hear millions or billions of years ago, what they're really saying is once upon a time, science of the gaps. They don't know where the Big Bang came from, how it got there, how it created space and time, if it was already inside of space and time, and they can't just observe or demonstrate how life came from an explosion. Maybe because it never happened. Nobody has ever seen a good explosion. Nobody has seen the people in Kawajima who were destroyed in an explosion, who were murdered and killed. That explosion didn't give them life, So why would an explosion give us life today? That goes against uniformitarianism. That's another contradiction to uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism says that everything in the universe that we have today, or how everything is working in the universe today, that's how it's always been. As a matter of fact, even with the shredder layers that Jake has said, he said, "Hey, don't you know that those layers are billions of years old? They're millions of years old. Well, you're assuming that those layers have always been here. Those layers have not always been here. As a matter of fact, I can even prove right now in about 30 seconds that those layers can't be billions of years old. If you take a bottle or if you take a jar and you fill it up with some dirt and you fill it up with some water, you shake it up real quick, then the dirt will start to form layers in a couple of minutes. If you have a clear vacuum and you start to vacuum your floor real quick, the dirt will start to form layers inside of the vacuum cleaner within minutes. It doesn't take billions of years to form dirt and layers. It only takes a couple of minutes. And anybody who tells you that it took billions of years, how do they know that when they didn't observe it? You can't observe billions of years. So why is gap reasoning not okay with other religions, but when the religion of evolution can use gap reasoning to support their entire creation myth, it's called science? Well, because we don't know billions of years, because we don't know this happened, because we don't know therefore that happened, right? They don't have any observational evidence, and a lot of times if they're honest, they'll say, well, I don't know. That's not science. That's ignorance. Science comes from the word gnosis, I think, or scientia, which means to know. So whenever you start from the point of not knowing, that is not science, because science is talking about the things that we do know. But with scientism, it's all about what they don't know. Anybody can make up a story from some things that they don't know from their imagination, but it's hard to construct a story off of evidence and off of things that we do know. It's a fascinating theory. It's a fascinating creation myth, but it just doesn't hold up to science. So here are some things that we can observe with our five senses, but yet we know they exist. These things actually just prove scientism in and out of themselves. What is a thought? We can't observe a thought. Who has ever tasted a color? Who has ever heard blood? Who has ever felt a rainbow? Those are things that we haven't observed, but the reason why we can't observe those is because we don't have all of the senses that will be needed to do the things that I just mentioned. We're actually losing our senses. Who's to say that we did? Who's to say that we didn't have more than five senses? They're assuming that the senses that we have today are the senses that we've always had. Remember, Adam was perfect, and so he probably was able to not only hear music, but he could probably see music. So uniformitarianism assumes that the senses that we have today are the senses we always had. So what scientism can't explain is free will. They can't explain the laws of logic. They can't explain reason. They can't explain orderly laws. They can't explain reality or realism. Scientism can't explain morality. They just said themselves. And scientism can't even prove scientism. How do I know that? When somebody says that you should only believe in things that you can test, observe, and repeat, then that means that you shouldn't believe that, because that's not scientifically proven. So scientism actually refutes itself. And so there goes my presentation. Atheism, humanism, naturalism, and uniformitarianism are all branches of scientism, and they actually aren't liable models for real life. And I'm done. Give me 1 minute to just take my screen off.
That's no problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you.
It sounds like we might kind of be losing our moderator. I hear him breaking in, but the sound quality is very low.
Oh, you hear me? I mean, can I hear you?
I can hear you fine, Wayne.
Isaac?
Hello?
Yeah, you got muted. I don't know what happened.
Okay, yeah, I hear him fine now.
All right, and that's my 20 minutes. That's Tom.
Okay.
And now we can do it's a 5-minute rebuttal, right? Or no, was it?
No,
10 minutes.
Yeah, that was your 20 minutes. Yeah, so we timed the rebuttal at 10 minutes.
All right, 10 minutes. All right, there you go. All right,
okay.
10 minutes, and I'm gonna just mute my microphone so you don't hear me.
That's no problem. Okay. I guess go ahead and start. I guess start the time whenever I start. Okay.
All right.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Okay. For example, I think Wayne makes a few assumptions here that aren't quite appropriate. For example, he talks about the Big Bang as an explosion. The term Big Bang is actually insultingly simplistic, but it was coined to be so. They intentionally said Big Bang as a derogatory way of describing the theory that the universe expanded. In fact, the entire contents of the universe expanded with incredible speed, but that is not appropriately comparable to conventional or even cataclysmic explosions. So the idea that what exploded, it's a nonsensical question. Nobody said something exploded. It wasn't a bomb or anything like that. Now, what exactly it was, I'm not a theoretical physicist. That's way above my pay grade. He also seems to think that there's some direct connection between the Big Bang and bioevolution. The idea, oh, well, something exploded, which we've already said that is not an appropriate comparison, and then something alive came out of it. Well, that's completely inappropriate. That's like saying you think explosions create airplanes. I've never seen an explosion create an airplane. The explosion can destroy an airplane, and yet the raw materials that many airplanes are composed of require many explosions to bring metals like titanium and aluminum to the refinery and then to the factory and everything. Airplanes are impossible without explosion, but it's simplistic to say that you can make an explosion assemble an airplane. That just simply isn't an appropriate comparison there. As far as the Genesis account of creation, Genesis has problems right from the offset, such common sense things like the sun wasn't created until day or 3 or 4. How were there even days before the sun was created? Sure, maybe the Shekinah of Yahweh provided a light source, but were we also supposed to believe that God's face went down at night until he got around to creating the sun? Plus, there's the bigger question of Scripture. If you're going to believe in Scripture, how do you know which Scripture to believe in? Well, it says right here in the Bible. Well, okay. Well, it also says in the Bible that Jesus was the Son of God. Well, it's black and white, word for word. It simply says, Allah does not beget, nor is he begotten. That's in the 112th surah of the Quran. Well, people say, well, not the Quran. I don't believe in the Quran. And so, well, if you're going to topic of scientism versus creation science. So moving along, he also makes some assumptions about scientism and naturalistic philosophies. And what is not testable is non-existent. And I've never heard an advocate of science or science education say if we can't test it, it doesn't exist. I think you're confusing scientism with solipsism. The idea that things didn't exist before we knew about them is closer to solipsism than scientism. Madame Curie and her husband suffered severe wounds from the radiation they're working with before they knew that the radiation existed. Obviously, it existed before they were aware of it. Uh, so the idea that we believe that what is not testable is non-existent is not accurate whatsoever. There are many atheists who are also agnostics who don't believe that the gods exist, but they can't rule it out. They said maybe the gods exist, but as a practical matter, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. I can't prove to you that the gods don't exist, but I also have no practical or compelling personal reason to act as if they do until they're made evident to me. Uh, Also, if there's no observable evidence, why should we accept non-observable claims about the gods or about what happened in Jerusalem thousands of years ago, but we're not supposed to believe in claims that are observable, as most scientific claims are, even though they're observable only in part. A thorough understanding of the physical universe is very much a jigsaw puzzle thing. We see a little piece here, we see a little piece there, we make logical inferences. We do the best we can with it, knowing that we can't observe the entire universe at one time. But we're going back into the religious question of you can't prove evolution exists, therefore you're wrong for believing it, but please accept my account of my God that supposedly lived, died, and then resurrected thousands of years ago, even though we obviously can't observe that firsthand. There's some cleaning up a few things. Color, we don't know where color comes from. Of course, we know where color comes from. Color comes from variations in the electromagnetic wavelength, the wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation, and we can observe that with instruments. We can observe that very directly and very finely with electronic equipment. We also know why we perceive it differently because of cells in our retinas called cones, which perceive color, as opposed to the rods, which only perceive light in black and white. Uh, and while we're on the topic of light, let's talk about why light is important in supporting the ancient view of the universe. We can use triangulation and observation, various other methods to examine the fact that the universe is immensely vast. When you look at the stars at night, you're not only looking across our galaxy, but you're looking across years or dozens of years or many centuries of time. If the universe was only 6,000 years old, then most of the sky would be black. The God that created the universe of just a few millennia ago would have peopled it with stars that we would not be able to see for many thousands of years to come. Um, Now you're saying, we observe the universe works in a certain way. That watch had to have a watchmaker because complex mechanisms don't assemble themselves out of nothing. And yet the same person who says that wants me to believe that the universe was created by God 6,000 years ago, but he changed the speed of light with his divine hand just so we could see the stars in the night sky. Also, when we talk about what has existence has to have a creator, we're talking about everything, talking about the universe. The universe obviously exists. Everything that exists had a beginning. What has a beginning has to have an actor that makes it begin. It has to have a motive force, a first cause. Okay, well, let's go with that. Okay, let's call that first cause God. Okay, well, then my question is, who is God's God? Who created the God? If the universe has to have a beginning and a creator, then because everything has a beginning, then why does God not require a beginning? Well, you say God is a non-contingent being. Non-contingent beings don't need an initiator. They don't need a prime mover. Well, now that's special pleading. That's the very definition of special pleading. If God doesn't require a beginning, why is it that the universe requires a beginning? If everything requires a beginning, then that would presumably apply to God, and we just kick the can down the road a little bit more. The idea of before the Big Bang is nonsensical. If everything, mass, energy, space, time itself has to have a beginning, and most physicists do agree with the theologians about this. If time had a beginning, and we put that beginning at 15 billion years ago at the time of the Big Bang, then that's fine. We can push time back to that. But then the question, what happened before the Big Bang, what happened before time began, becomes nonsensical. I'm not saying it doesn't have an answer, but I'm saying the answer might be something that people can't understand in the manner that we understand time, certainly not in the manner that I understand things. Second law of thermodynamics is important, but we know things wind down, systems wind down, they suffer a heat death. You can't, and systems trend inexorably towards greater entropy, and life seems to fly in the face of this by reproducing. Animals reproduce, and they produce more of their kind. They're highly structured and ordered, but they don't violate the second law of thermodynamics. Ecosystems are the recipients of enormous infusions of energy in the form of solar radiation. Individual organisms, as they grow and become more complex and more ordered, apparently flouting the second law of thermodynamics, shed waste heat into their environment, and heat is entropy. With the greater amount of heat, highly ordered system that is shedding waste heat is not a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. And for that matter, physicists believe that the universe at large is winding down, and it may suffer a heat death eventually. Don't confuse a local increase in order with a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. As far as things becoming more ordered and more orderly, information coming from nothing, anyone can look up Conway's Game of Life, a program that in which there's a large grid, and they're cellular automata. Each distinct cell in the grid occupies a live or a dead state. And with a very, very simple rule set, you can yield from a randomly seeded field a staggering variety of structures, static or dynamic stable structures that some structures simply decay into nothing. Others can stay in a static or an oscillating state. There's structures called gliders that can move across the field but remain essentially unchanged unless they contact something else. There are even structures as complex as those called glider guns, a stable structure that is moving and yet it's ejecting gliders from it. These are almost all discovered completely by accident from a randomly seeded field. They don't require design. They weren't designed. They were discovered from randomness. Also take the example of genetic algorithms. Very simple programs. You have three parts to genetic algorithm. You have a base code, a program that performs a function, and you have a utility that inserts random information into that program. It just randomly changes the ones and zeros in there. And then you have a fitness filter with a fairly simple process of randomly altering code, checking to see how fit the result is to perform the given task. You can come up with very efficient programs after resulting thousands or even millions of iterations of this code. You have a computer program that was designed by a simpler computer program that people set up. No one programmed that code. It emerged as an emergent property from fairly simple initial conditions. Where did the new information come from? Also, as far as the types of creatures, atavisms strongly suggest the nature of ancestral species. You have these weird freaks that come out. You have snakes or dolphins that have hind legs. You have humans that are born with a vestigial tail instead of the entirely internal tailbone that a normal human has. But you never see apes that have feathers. You never see turtles with hair. These throwbacks to ancestral species strongly suggest that the genetic code for those anatomical structures exists but has been suppressed by the as unnecessary as creatures evolve, but it's still there. But atavisms are always throwbacks. They're never leaps forward, and they're never something that's entirely outside what you would expect to see from the way a creature evolved. The idea, the fear of death. I have one more point. If I have 30 seconds.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much. And lastly, the idea of death. People always fear death. People, I think, are willing to accept the idea of hell because they are so thoroughly horrified by the concept of oblivion. I mean, you might be tormented for all eternity, but it's not as horrific as the idea of not existing. And this death, the contemplation of oblivion, provides an incredibly strong incentive for any explanation, any myth, any comfort, any assurance that your consciousness is eternal, even when it is so obvious that your body is not. And I think that that is a strong, and that constitutes a very, very compelling reason to believe in the gods and to believe in the afterlife. And that motive has absolutely nothing to do with whether the gods or an afterlife actually exists or not. Thank you.
Hello.
I'm still here.
All right. Let's see. Is our moderator still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, got you. You're supposed to be keeping time, man. All right. So now I guess you guys can start time because my PowerPoint presentation is done. But I'm just going to address some of the points that Jake had brought up, and then I'm going to draw my own points. And I guess you can put 10 minutes in the clock. Brastic, tell me, I guess, when you're starting. When you're ready. All right. So you mentioned that in creation, he said, well, how can you have days without the sun? Well, you don't need the sun for time. Time is constantly going on right now, and God forbid if the sun blew up right now, the sun would need to blow up inside of time, and time will still keep on going. As a matter of fact, in Alaska, when they don't see the sun, when the sun doesn't go up, the sun doesn't go up for 40 days, but they still know what date it is. They still know what time it is, You don't need the sun for to know what day it is or how many days went past. You need time for that. You don't need the sun. So that's a wrong assertion. Uh, Dismissive cherry picking once again. You said a lot of people believe in God because of they fear of going to hell or they fear something bad will happen. There are certain religions where there is no hell. There are certain religions where the worst that could happen to you is that you'll come back as a fly. So I mean that's not really anything to be afraid of. This is the classic demytholization or demythologizing. What I had said in my PowerPoint. This is nothing but the art of demythologizing. And so when people try to demythologize myths, because myths assert the supernatural, all demythologizing does is it asserts a natural cause for things that you can't explain. It's nothing but the science of the gaps. Well, because we don't know, it had to be a natural cause. We don't know. I can't disprove God, but I do know that the supernatural doesn't exist. I can't prove the supernatural, or because we can't disprove it.
Wayne, apologies for breaking in. Can you still hear me? I lost you.
Hello?
Did we lose Wayne?
I think so. I didn't hear anything for a while.
I don't see him in the Google Hangout chat.
This thing must have went off. Hello?
I'm still here.
He was on. Went off again.
Oh, he just messaged me. He just messaged me in Facebook. He knows he lost us.
Hello?
I'm still here. He says he's turning his internet back on and stuff, so hopefully soon.
Do you guys hear me?
I got you now.
No idea what happened.
I wasn't timing it, so if you'd like, you can start at the beginning of your rebuttal.
All right, got you. Where did
Is
I leave off? Well, I don't know where I left off at, but I'm just go where I where I
okay.
think I left off
Hey,
at.
do you think it's okay on the YouTube?
Yeah, it's it
Okay.
says it's still broadcasting. It's still live.
Okay, great. All right. Well, whenever you're ready, man.
All right, got you. And I'm just going to need 5 minutes to wrap this up because I don't want to start all over again. All right. So, basically, you said, just because you can't disprove those guys, it doesn't mean that you need evidence to disprove them. You say you don't need evidence to disprove something, uh, to prove that it doesn't exist. I agree. I agree. But once one of those guys prove themselves, it's up to all the people in those other different religions to prove their God exists. Basically, what you just gave forth was Matt Dillahunty logic. Well, I know that the amount of nuts in this jar is wrong, but I don't have to prove it. Well, wait a minute. How do you know that? How do you know? How do we know that you know the amount of nuts in that jar is not is wrong? You haven't proven to us that it's wrong. You just said that you know it's wrong. That's not good logic. That's just making an assertion, and that's actually called dismissive cherry picking. It's when you go and you suck in certain claims, and then when you get rebuttals or claims back, you dismiss it and you only accept the claims that you like. Well, you can't do that. That's not really looking at evidence. That's just being dismissive. It's like when you call somebody crazy. A lot of times when somebody calls somebody else crazy, they're not really crazy. They're just being dismissive. They're dismissing them. And that's exactly what we see from people who believe in scientism, and we see that from a lot of atheists, naturalists, humanists, secularists, and uniformitarianists. They're using dismissive cherry picking so that they can try and demythologize things. But really, whenever somebody tries to demythologize anything that they think is a myth, they're actually asserting that the gap that you can fill in with that is naturalism, or a natural cause. They say, well, even though we don't know certain things about what we can explain, don't worry. In a few years, science will fill in the gap, and we'll be able to explain this naturally. How do you know that? That's an assertion for naturalism, and it's actually a hindrance to science. It's actually a hindrance to the things that we do know. We know for a fact that time, space, and matter hasn't always existed. Therefore, the supernatural must have created it. That's the most logical aspect that you can come up with. We know that time and space is running down. Therefore, we know that at one time, time and space and everything else used to be perfect. Now, a lot of times we don't. Nobody knows outside of or science can't say exactly the origin of evil. Science can't say the origin of why things are running down. Science can't say the origin of why things aren't perfect anymore. We don't have any eyewitnesses to actually tell us why things in the universe are the way they are today. Or we don't have eyewitnesses even to tell us how those things were in the past, when they first began. All we have to go off of are historical documents from the past to prove the present. And so people who believe the Bible, they're using the Bible to interpret the present, but people who don't believe in the Bible, they're using the present to interpret the past. And you obviously can't do that unless you have historical evidence so that you can interpret the observational evidence. And the Bible is actually just that. It's a historical document. The Bible is historical evidence that tells us about the past, and it tells us why things are the way they are today. The Bible says that sin and death enter after man, and that the reason why people die, and the reason why bad things happen to good people, and the reason why there's evil and corruption and darkness in the world is because men sinned and men rejected God. How else would we have known about this unless somebody told us? You can't look at any of the things today and know that the reason why the world is the way it is because Adam sinned in the garden. You would need somebody to tell you, and you also would need somebody to observe it. We actually do have that. A lot of people say, well, who was there in the beginning? God was there. And God has told us through his word exactly what happened and why it happened. And God has preserved his word, and we actually have a copy of it today. So the only way you actually can interpret reality right is through the historical document of the Bible. You need the historical document to even interpret the observational evidence. So you need the historical evidence first, then the observational evidence. Because if you just look at the observational evidence and you try to interpret the present, or you try to interpret the past because of the present, it can't be done because you can't assume that the way things are today are the way they always been. And with that being said, I think that'll wrap up my 5 minutes. I actually still have a few couple of minutes, so I'm going to end with these words. You know, out of the whole debate, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but when I mentioned the science of gaps and the dismissive cherry picking and demythologizing, notice how almost any atheist or any evolutionist you come across will always dance around their claim, and they will not answer they won't answer your claims. They'll just use the scientific gaps. Well, because I don't know billions of years, because I don't know, therefore this, because I don't know, therefore that. And they'll try to demythologize it. So remember, they're dismissive cherry picking, demythologizing, and then they use the science of the gaps. And these are all just assertions of scientism. Now, scientism can't even prove scientism, because if scientism is true, you shouldn't believe that. And that'll wrap it up. So, I guess if we have any people who are viewing um this debate, I guess you can ask a question. I'm gonna put on the Q&A section right now. This is this feature. Hold on 1 minute. Is everybody still here?
I still got you.
All right, I'm gonna put on the Q&A section. Try my best to so this feature is disabled. All right. I have no idea what's wrong with this thing. Hold on, give me 1 minute.
I'm still here.
Is our moderator still here?
Yeah.
All right, got you. Sound like a drug robot. All right, this is just saying that the feature is disabled. I know it's disabled. How can I enable it? All right. Well, because this isn't working, I think we're just going to end the broadcast. But I guess what did we said we're going to have like 5 minutes closing or 2 minutes closing. But what did we say before? I said.
Well, we could have some back and forth informal if you want.
It's already been like an hour. And I did do that during the last debate, and we got way past time. I like just formal debates. But I guess let's just do like a 2 minute closing.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
What you say?
2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes? Yeah, 2 minute closing. All right. I guess it is your turn to do your 2 minute closing, Jake.
Well, I'd like to address the assertion that we use gods of the gaps or dismissal, cherry picking, dismissive attitude and such. And I don't think that's accurate because I didn't say that because I don't know there are no gods. I said because there is no apparently credible evidence. I just assume that there are no gods, and until I have credible evidence, I will continue to assume that. And you know what? Everyone does this. Everybody does this. You know, they may not do it with regard to the gods, but they do it with regard to real life dragons and leprechauns and unicorns. I mean, people, you can't just assume that every mythological invention exists until it's been absolutely disproven. If we did that, people who do that are thought to be loons or mentally ill, unless they do it with regard to the gods. If they do it with the gods, that gets the special treatment that's just called religion. I'm not hostile towards, particularly hostile towards religion, unless it's obviously harmful. But I'm content to coexist. But I won't apologize for not adhering to a supernatural belief. I would also, I would like to say that we don't. This idea of the God of the Gaps thing is God of the Gaps, billions of years is God of the Gaps. It's absolutely not. When you can make observations and measure quantifiable data, you say, we can measure the rate of sedimentary deposit on at a few millimeters per year, or a continental drift at a few inches per year. Then extrapolating the great thicknesses and distances of things, uh, it's not because we don't know therefore billions of years. It's we can measure the rate of change, and this distance strongly supports the idea billions of years. So it's not just something we pull out of thin air. It's something that's supported by the rate of that we observe changes.
Oh, and that's 2 minutes. That's 2 minutes and 20 seconds. All right, I'm gonna
That's
this
right
back
at
to.
2. Yep.
Let me just restart time. All right, and I'm ready. So, all we basically heard today, we didn't really get any evidence for evolution. We didn't really get any evidence for atheism. What we got was a dance around hot coals, and basically we just heard, well, my belief is true because my belief is true, or my religion, the scientism, atheism, humanism, or naturalism, uniformitarianism, whatever you want to call it. All we got is, well, it's true because of this, that, and third, but we didn't really get any real observational, testable, repeatable evidence. I gave observational, repeatable, testable evidence numerous times, probably about 6, 7, 8, maybe 11 times. We know that time and space had a beginning because time and space is running down. We know that everything used to be perfect because our DNA and everything else isn't perfect. We know that there had to be some type of timeless, spaceless, matterless creator because at one time, space, and matter didn't exist. And we know for a fact that the God of the Bible did it because there are over 6,000 prophecies in the Bible that make predictions about the future, and they all came true. That's mathematically uh, what's the word that I said before? That's mathematically crazy. That's plausible. It has to be true because the math and the numbers and everything else backing the prophecies and those predictions, they come true. But anyway, because I'm getting stuck in my words here. But one of the last things I would like to one of the last points I'd like to make before my 2 minutes is up is everybody gets natural selection and evolution confused. And let's say evolution is true. Where are the transitional animals that they're saying, the apes turn into, the transitional animals, and these transitional animals turn to people? And they say, oh, we got evidence. And then they bring you some bones in the dirt. And then they say, oh, we got evidence. And then they show you some CGI animation. They say, oh, we got evidence. And then they show you paintings of apes turning into people. Well, we've never observed this. This isn't observable. This isn't testable. This isn't repeatable. But what we do see over and over again is animals producing after their kind, and we see different variations. We see different variations actually making a downgrade in their genetic pattern because of natural selection. So we only see creation science. We never see scientism. Scientism can't prove scientism. And all we actually got today was science of the gaps. And we got dismissive cherry picking along with demythologizing. All of these dating methods and everything else that they use, they're all based off of assumptions anyway. They're assuming that they're assuming that millions of years is right to begin with. And there's actually been like I think around hundreds of frauds that prove that they know that millions of years can't happen because if they is that Tom?
Still here.
Oh,
Yeah, true.
2 minutes. Oh, all right, got you. All right, well I think that concludes the debate. And
You still there, Wayne?
yep, I'm still here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right, that concludes the debate. Thank you for coming on to the broadcast. We've been
Did I lose you guys?
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. I lost you for a little while.
All right, so I guess that's the end for our debate. But thank you for coming on to the broadcast. I really appreciate you coming. I know we were talking about we were going to do this for a long time, so I actually appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I'm sorry we couldn't get it together earlier. I think like a week and a half ago we tried, but couldn't make it happen. Hey, I don't think we have time for 6,000, but do you want to cite one prophecy?
One prophecy.
We have time for one, certainly.
All right, one prophecy from the Bible. Genesis 3 says that the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent will bruise the seed of the woman's head. And we actually see that prophecy fulfilled in the book of
Oh,
John.
come on, not that one. That people are going to step on snakes. That's not a prophecy. I need something specific.
Now that is
Always step on
specific.
snakes.
It says that the serpent will bruise the heel of the seed of the woman, and we see that in the book of John. Jesus' heel was bruised on the cross.
Isn't it eminently reasonable to assume that maybe the story was written after people noticed that snakes were biting their legs and they were stepping on snakes? I mean
Isn't it what?
that would be eminently reasonable to assume
Well,
that the story was written after the fact.
well, what you just did
Come
is
on,
you
like a
just tried to be
specific.
mythologized. You just asserted naturalism.
Well, that's because there's nothing unnatural about snakes biting people and people stepping on snakes.
Well,
There's nothing to mythologize there. That's just a completely mundane event.
well, who's to say that if God is God, can't God speak prophecies into existence? That's putting a limit on God. You know.
That's an awfully disappointing prophecy. Would you like to pick another one?
Another prophecy. Let's see. Um. Oh, Jesus predicted his death more than 3 times in the Gospels. What I'll do is the next time we talk, I will message you the Bible scripture. I don't know them off the top of my head, but Jesus prophesied about his own death, and he died exactly the way he said he would die. He said
Well,
he would
see,
be.
that would be really impressive, except for the fact that we know that because of the New Testament scriptures were written down long after his death.
Yeah, but as long
That's
as
by
they,
even the most friendly accounts for Christian apologetics readily admit that it was at least a few decades, and then sometimes they'll admit to being several decades after the crucifixion. So I
well,
mean,
historians say that as
it,
long as the documents were written in the same century that Jesus died or supposedly resurrected from the dead, then those documents are still legible. And we know for a fact that the documents that we have, they actually were written in the same century that the resurrection of Jesus would claim. So we actually can take those to our credible account. You guys can look at, as a matter of fact, J. Warner Wallace, I think Bobby Conway, Frank Turek, and a lot of other apologists. They do a lot more research on this than me.
oh yeah, Joshua McDowell is one of the best ones. He's one of the best, but I couldn't follow him, indefinitely. He was one of my favorite when I was a Christian, but eventually seemed like a house of cards. Let me get this one thing straight though, okay?
Hmm.
You want me? You're going to call the measurement of tectonic plate movement at a few inches per year, and the projection of that rate of movement to explain the distance of the continents. That's simple math. That's simple math, and the result comes out to be hundreds of millions of years. That I am not supposed to believe because I can't observe it directly, but a story about a guy getting crucified and coming back from the dead that happened thousands of years ago, I'm just supposed to accept at face value.
Oh no, I actually remember in the beginning of my presentation, I said the Bible says test it out. You do the test. You actually look at the evidence. But even with, like I said, with all of those dating methods and everything like that, they all start off with assumptions because the people who are doing them believe in millions of years in the first place.
Okay,
But
so how does that not apply to theistic archaeologists or apologists?
well, remember there are a whole lot of atheists who go and they become paleontologists or archaeologists, and when they look at the evidence, that same evidence actually converts them to be Christians.
Okay, and there's also the old joke that seminary is where God goes to die. And there's also the old joke that if you go to seminary and finish and still believe in God, you weren't paying attention. Those people, there are many people. He said, yes, there are people. There are people that go that way. There are atheists that come to belief in one religion or another. I mean, ISIS is converting Americans. Not only are they converting them just to Islam, they're converting them to a radicalized militant form of Islam. So people have reasons to go to various faiths from a state of non-belief or from a state of belief of another faith. But I can promise you, and I've experienced it, sir, many people go from very devout, conventional, mainstream Christian faith to rationalism.
Well, the Bible actually says this about Christians who lose their faith. It says that though they were of us and they went out from us, they never really were of us, because if they were of us, they would have stayed with us. So a lot of people who claim to be Christians, but they don't finish out the Christian walk. They never were really Christians to begin with.
Well,
And the
that's
reason,
something that's obviously cannot be vetted objectively from the outside. Uh, but but uh, but I mean, that's there are people who leave and there are people who join faiths. I mean, it's especially in a nation like the United States where there's a large degree of religious freedom. You don't risk being burned at the stake or shunned from a community. Not to say there's not prejudice, but there's not institutionalized persecution.
oh yeah, and remember, the people who are getting persecuted the most and still are getting persecuted today, the numbers actually exceed the Jewish Holocaust, are the Christians. The Christians are the ones today who are actually the Jews who are getting persecuted. Our numbers actually exceed the ones in the Holocaust. So.
Okay, I don't intend to turn this into persecution palooza, but people of all faiths or in all belief systems are persecuted by those of other belief systems.
Oh yeah, I agree, but I'm,
But
I'm just
uh,
saying the ones who are getting
but the
persecuted the
thing is,
most are the Christians.
someone's commitment to a belief system and someone's persecution, neither of those are relevant as to the accuracy of their underlying belief. People say, well, the apostles and the disciples, you know, Christ's vision, Christ's claims had to be true because these people were tortured, they were executed. There's, of course, the story of Peter being crucified upside down because he insisted he wasn't worthy of being executed in the manner of his master. Those people really, really believed. They were true believers, and that proves that Christ's vision was real. Except that people were just committed and were willing to die for their cause when they perpetrated the 9/11 hijacking. Weren't they just as committed? They died for their cause. They didn't even suffer death because of their beliefs. They sought out an action that they knew would result in their own deaths. Okay,
Uh,
so just having people who are committed to a belief does not prove the belief true. And in the same manner, people who disagree with another person's belief and subject those other people to persecution doesn't prove valid the belief of the persecuted or of their tormentors.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree. And before we end this debate, I'm gonna just say this: you're absolutely right. But you know what does prove the belief? Even though you can really really believe something and really really be wrong, but what proves the belief is the reality of the belief. And we know that the belief is true. We know that the belief is real from looking at the evidence. And the evidence actually brought me to faith in Jesus Christ. One of the biggest evidences for Christianity is one creation, but it's also the resurrection. So if anybody's watching this right now, and maybe you heard about Jesus, or you heard about different gods, or you heard about different myths, uh, what I can tell you is from the Bible, from beginning to end, it is scientifically accurate to the T. And before we break this out, I just want to share with you one of the most important things that I would share with me, which is the gospel. Scientifically, I'm going to tell you the gospel. This isn't going to be one of these, preachy, feel good messages or anything, but in about 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly why I believe what I believe. Our DNA is breaking down. We all know. I mean, even Jake can agree that our DNA is breaking down. And as we get older, our bodies break down, our tissue and genomes and stuff, start breaking down and everything. And the reason why our bodies are doing it, the reason why our DNA keeps on breaking down, and it's like an inherent disease where we pass it down to our kids and their kids, and it keeps on getting worse, and we keep on getting dumber, weaker, smaller, is because Adam and Eve sinned. Their genome, their DNA was perfect, but then they broke away from God. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, and so God has given us a little taste of what it's like to live without Him. Do you like it? You know. So as as the historical account goes, Adam and Eve sinned, sin and death entered into the world, and now we get old and our bodies break down. At one point, God was the one who was holding our DNA together, but now God doesn't hold our DNA together anymore. It's like solid, liquid, and gases with atoms. As as the younger you are, the atoms in your body are tighter, but the older you get, the atoms get looser and looser and looser, and that's exactly what we observe today. And so our genes are corrupted. So we needed a savior to actually save us. And so 2,000 years after man sinned in the garden, their DNA was corrupted. An angel came to Mary and he said, "Unto you a child is born, and his name shall be Jesus." And so Jesus died, or Jesus died on the cross for your sins. And when Jesus did that, he basically traded his genes for your genes. And so all you have to do is believe in Jesus, and you will get the spiritual blood transfusion. God will change you from the inside out. You will get a new heart. You will get new desires because you will get new DNA. Christians have DNA inside of their body that nobody else in the world has. And that alone just proves Christianity to be true because we observationally have something that other people don't have. We got the DNA of Jesus Christ inside of us. With that being said, that DNA actually is what gets you into heaven. When Jesus died on the cross for you, he died so that his perfect DNA could cover your imperfect DNA, so that when you stand before God, God won't see you in your messed up, nasty genome, but he'll see you in the genome of Jesus Christ. We've all lied. We've all stolen. We've all committed adultery in our hearts. There are some people who are addicted to drugs. Some people are addicted to pornography. Some people are addicted to masturbating. Some people are addicted to all weird things. And when you die, you're going to have to give an account to God for everything you've done. Jesus said that. Jesus said that you'll have to give an account for every idle word that came out of your mouth. And I don't want anybody here to go to hell. And that's exactly why I'm speaking. I'm actually telling you guys this message today. How do you escape the judgment? How do you escape hell? You believe on Jesus, and you will get that spiritual blood transfusion. And the day you stand before God, you won't stand before God in your own DNA. You'll stand before God and the DNA of Jesus Christ. So I hope somebody hears this and it changes somebody's life. And I thank you, Jake, for coming on to the show. I thank you, Bryzik, for being a mediator. Let's do it again. And this was awesome. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.
Hey, Wayne, wait a minute. Before you go, hey, Wayne, you still there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Before you go, let me ask you something. What is it about the Bible? What's the Bible have? What message? What theme? What is the nature of Yahweh or Jesus Christ or anything? What is it about that work? That work that's probably, I have no doubt, the Bible is the most important book written in history. I mean, the cultural impact, the literary impact, its impact on philosophy and law. I believe any well-educated person should be familiar. Maybe they don't need to read every page of it, but they should be familiar with the major themes and content of the Bible. But what is it about the Bible? What is it about, whether it's the Old Testament or the gospel message or the philosophy of Christ? What is it that the Bible has that no other religious tradition has, that no other holy book has? Have you ever heard of the adage, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail? Have you? How many holy books have you read? What have you read? Have you read the Bible?
I've read the Bible, I've read the Quran, and I read the Book of Mormon.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's a lot more than a lot of people. You've read the entire Bible?
I wouldn't say the entire Bible, but most of it, because I know there's some parts of it I'm not familiar with.
Okay. Does the church steer you strongly to the Gospels and Acts and stuff? They try to keep you away from the Old Testament?
Nah, I read the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Okay. I'm actually surprised that you've read the Book of Mormon and the Quran. I have not read all of the Book of Mormon.
As a matter of fact, let me turn my camera on. I got a Book of Mormon right here on my desk. I don't know. Can you guys see it?
Free. You was in a hotel. I guess they said, hey, it seems to be working for the Gideons. But
can you guys see it?
Yeah, I see that. I've read the Bible. I've read some of the Book of Mormon. I've read extensively secondary sources about the Apocrypha. I've read the Tao Te Ching. I've read the Book of Five Rings. I've read, and these are all translations, of course, because I don't read Chaldee and Arabic and Sanskrit. I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I've read Plato's Republic. When you have that much exposure to all the different traditions and everything, the question comes up: how do you know which one's the right one?
I don't know which God's the right one. Well, like I said, the prophecies in the Bible. There are thousands and thousands of prophecies in the Bible that.
You got to have better ones than snakes will bite you and you'll step on them. Just give me one that's better than that.
All right, there's if I can Google it real quick. I mean, these prophecies they're not on top of my head, but I can get. As a matter of fact, give me 1 minute.
Sure.
All right, I'm about to give you one. Hold on, it's one. All right, so I'm going to read from the King James version. This is Genesis 15:13, and this is a really powerful one. Uh, and this is God talking to Abraham, but he didn't name him Abraham yet. His name was still Abram.
Right.
And well, I'm gonna read from the Holman Christian Standard Bible. It says, "Then the Lord said to Abram, know this for certain: your offspring will be foreigners in a land that does not belong to them. They will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years." That verse is the prophecy of my ancestors, black people. Black people were oppressed for 400 years in a foreign land that was not theirs. And black people, or the Hebrew people, not African people, Hebrew people, which were brown skinned, are the seed of Abraham. That is a fulfilled prophecy that we can still see the results of today.
That's pretty good. That's pretty strong. Except, how do you know it wasn't written after the fact?
Well, the Bible was written
Because
way
the
before
Pentateuch,
people
you're
were.
talking about Genesis, right?
Yeah, Genesis.
Okay, Genesis is part of the Pentateuch. It's the first part of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which, according to all major traditions, scholastic traditions, was recorded by Moses. So this is after they were free from. This is after the Exodus, when it was recorded. So I mean, you can prophesy with 100% accuracy after the fact anytime you want.
Well, the only
You know
this
what? I'll
had
predict the stock market for you. I'll predict the stock market for you for the entire next week. Just let me get you the paper the week after that.
well, systematically, I mean, I just basically did prove a prophecy step by step. Black people or Hebrew people are the seed of Abraham. We were in captivity for 400 years in a foreign land that was not ours, and that was way before it happened. That was thousands of years before my people
No,
were
I'm
in
pretty sure
captivity.
they're talking about the Hebrews. You're talking about a historical convergence, the experience of the the Atlantic slave trade versus the enslavement of the Hebrews. But people being subjugated and enslaved for 400 years is hardly a historically unique thing in the history of the world.
Oh well, it's happened to the Hebrew people. As a matter of fact, people get Hebrew people confused with African people, but it's the Hebrew people who moved to Africa because they were getting slaughtered in their land, so they moved to another land. And
Well, yeah, you're talking about different ethnicities. I mean, we're talking about
yeah,
when people say black, they're usually referring to Bantu or Khoisan people in the sub-Saharan Africa, whereas the Arabs and Jews are Semitic people. So I mean, there's different ethnicities there. But
right. But I think this is just going to wrap up the broadcast. We're actually way over time. But thank you for coming on to the broadcast. We're going
all
to do it
right,
again.
thanks. Hey, we need to be a little more focused next time. One thing, we try to capture all cosmology and philosophy and bioevolution and pack all of that in. So we ought to be a little more focused next time, and then maybe tackle one subject with more thoroughness than try to capture, life, the universe, and everything.
Right, all right. Sounds good to me. Well,
All
let's do
right.
it. All right. I will talk to you guys later. And thank you. This has actually been fun. And I will talk to you guys later.
Thanks so much, Wayne.
You're welcome.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.